So history was made a few days ago when Alex Pereira won his second UFC title in just 11 MMA fights. Absolutely insane to think about. This man rose to the top of the MMA world after becoming two-weight world champ in kickboxing. His transition from kickboxing to MMA has been incredible to see. He also surrounded himself with a great team to further assist him in making the right moves when he fully decided to step into MMA. A year ago, he defeated Israel Adesanya to capture the middleweight title, and just 1 year later, he claimed the gold at light heavyweight. What are honestly the chances of that? Pretty much back-to-back titles in the span of 1 year. He went up against a very tough contender in Jiri Prochazka, and he finished the job in round 2 by TKO. However, now that the fight has ended, there are a ton of questions about certain topics and people are craving for the answers. I have a lot that I would like to say, so let's not waste any time and let's get straight into it. So for this fight, I was supposed to upload a prediction video where I break the fight down and give you my in-depth prediction, but unfortunately, I couldn't get it out on time. However, I still wanted to make sure that my prediction was out there in some form of content. So what I did was that I created a Twitter thread of my prediction and the keys to victory for both men. And if we review that thread, I pretty much called this fight down to the core. I successfully predicted that Pereira would win by stoppage in round 2. If you look at the keys to victory for both men, you can see that the fight played out in the way that it did. But I'm going to elaborate more on this as we get further into the video. What I want to address is firstly the ultimate question that everyone is having right now. Is Alex Pereira now the greatest combat sports athlete we've ever seen? 2 Glory Kickboxing titles and now 2 UFC titles. For me personally, I can see the argument as to why he's the greatest combat sports athlete of all time, but I can also see just as good of an argument, or if not better, that opposes that argument. People are saying yes because it's something that is just completely unheard of, and others are saying no for a few reasons. Daniel Cormier actually voiced his opinion about this, and he stated that he thought it was ridiculous. He thought that an Olympic wrestling medal was way more prestige than winning 2 Glory Kickboxing titles. In fact, he thought that he could beat some kickboxers in Glory despite labeling himself as a terrible kickboxer. From my point of view, this is what I believe about this whole discussion about whether or not Alex Pereira is indeed the greatest combat sports athlete of all time. This is how I see it, and let me know what you guys think about this. In my opinion, Glory Kickboxing is the best kickboxing organization in the world. When it initially kicked off, it was producing a ton of great kickboxers. However, for the last few years or so, I don't think Glory has had all of the best kickboxers in the world. They still do have a good amount, but there are also a good amount of kickboxers in other organizations, like for an example, 1FC or K1 in Japan. It's not like boxing where even though fighters are fighting in different promotions, it's much more common for them to come together and create mega fights. Hence Ryan Garcia versus Tank, whereas it's not common for kickboxing to do that. Or it's not like MMA in the UFC where the company pretty much owns, if we're being honest, about close to 98% of MMA talent around the world. Yeah, there might be some outliers and some elite fighters who aren't in the UFC, but generally speaking, the best fight in the UFC. Whereas in kickboxing, the best of the best could be in Glory, they could be in 1FC, they could be competing in different organizations in Japan as well, they could be competing in China. There are a lot of great kickboxers out there that are just roaming around the world. It's not like how everyone automatically comes to Glory, like how everybody comes to the UFC. For an example, Izzy and Pereira never fought each other in Glory. They fought on Glory of Heroes, which is a totally different promotion, but again, you get the point I'm trying to make. So for me, I'm not discrediting what Pereira has done. I just think for his sake, if he decided to win a title in Glory and then win a title in 1FC or a K1 title in Japan, that would actually benefit him way more in this discussion because he has fought a majority of talent in the kickboxing realm around the world. And I don't know a whole lot about Olympic wrestling, so if anybody has a good amount of knowledge around this topic, please feel free to fill me in. The people who compete in Olympic wrestling are all great wrestlers. It consists of guys who have been wrestling their whole life and has been training for this very moment. And I'm pretty sure you also have to go through a whole process to qualify to be on the Olympic team. Usually the top 1% are the ones that make the Olympic wrestling team. So if that's the case, I don't see why winning an Olympic gold medal wouldn't rank higher than winning a Glory Kickboxing title. You don't compete against the middle of the pack or the bottom of the barrel, you're competing against the top of the food chain in wrestling. And if you're able to become the last man standing out of that group, why wouldn't it be a huge accomplishment? Why wouldn't it be one of the best accomplishments in combat sports? That's how I personally view this. There's a reason why Henry Cejudo cherishes his wrestling medal way more than his UFC titles. And if I'm correct about this, then it all makes sense. I just think people are so fascinated with how fast Pereira has been able to achieve what he has achieved in combat sports that they kind of get lost in that idea. And don't get it twisted, what he has done has been fantastic. The percentage of kickboxers that can replicate what he has done is very slim. But when you're debating between a bunch of great combat athletes, usually little details like this, like the level of competition, are going to matter a lot. That's what's going to make the difference. That's what's going to create separation between all these great combat athletes. But whether or not Alex Pereira is the greatest combat sports athlete ever, there are a lot of things to take away from his fight against Jiri Prochazka that I feel like we should discuss about. The first thing that I want to talk about is the stare down before the fight. Bro, the stare down inside the cage was so crazy. Fam, the moment they looked at each other, it was like something out of a movie. That man was staring at each other like they were finna fight till they were dead. We got Jiri, who's the samurai. We got Pereira, who looks like a Brazilian warrior. They both look like video game characters. And there was one shot where the cameraman was filming right over Jiri's shoulder, looking at Pereira, and it was so beautiful to see. That has to be one of the best in-cage stare downs in UFC history. So the fight starts, and let me revisit my prediction thread on Twitter. For one of Jiri's keys, I said that Jiri needed to defend calf kicks. And this ties into my second takeaway, which is that Alex Pereira has probably the best calf kicks in all of MMA. He throws a Dutch style low kick where he doesn't turn his hips over, that is so precise, quick, and non-telegraphic that it just lands at will. He kicks just outside of punching range and he sells the kick by using his eyes. He'll look at you dead in your face and then he'll start to kick you. So why does Jiri need to defend the calf kicks that badly? Well, number one, it hurts. Secondly, in my thread, I stated that how Jiri deals with the fight in the center and when Pereira walks him down will determine how the fight will go. In the center of the octagon, Pereira has two weapons that you gotta look out for. The right calf kick and the jab. It can come to the head or down to the body. If he starts to land the calf kick, not only is he hurting you with those calf kicks, but he's also finding his range. Most guys that Pereira has faced don't usually play that leg checking game. What they'll do instead is that if they get hit with those leg kicks, they'll start to try to evade. They'll start to back up because mentally they don't want to push forward to continue to get chopped with those leg kicks. So because of that, Pereira usually catches his opponents in the spider web where he manipulates them to move backwards. And on the other side, Pereira will inch forward. One thing about Pereira is that he'll never rush forward. He'll take half steps into range, but he'll control the rhythm of the fight and he'll influence his opponents to slowly move backwards. Izzy has fallen into this trap despite his preferences of fighting on the back foot, and so has Jan Blachowicz. And even in certain moments of this fight, Jiri was also falling into that trap as well. So that's why it's so important for Jiri to address those kicks in the center of the octagon, because if Pereira can't find his mark with those kicks, he can't walk you down as easily. I also stated that I thought there was going to be little to no wrestling during the fight. The reasoning for that is because I thought both guys aren't grapplers, and engaging into that was only going to slow them down on their feet. But surprisingly, Jiri shot for a takedown up against the fence and got it. But my third takeaway is that Pereira's grappling has gotten to the point where it's good enough to hold off guys who are strikers who are trying to take advantage in the grappling realm. He showed it in the Jan Blachowicz fight, and he showed it in this fight. His takedown defense is a little sus just because when Jan and Jiri initially shot, this is now twice that Pereira is trying to look for a guillotine attempt instead of trying to stop the takedown. But on his back, he did very well to keep his guard tight. He was controlling Jiri's arms by hooking on the inside. By doing this, he's not going to allow Jiri to get any shots off. He didn't allow Jiri to posture and kept him close the entire time. He did very well to control his head. Eventually, he was able to use the fence and post to get back up on his feet. Nothing too crazy on the ground, but simple tactics that got him out of that predicament. And even though there are a lot of great things to hear about this performance, there are also things that weren't great to see as well. And in my fourth takeaway, it's the fact that defensively, Pereira is not great. He's great offensively as a striker, very dangerous. He's an A-level fighter on offense. Defensively, I'm not saying this because I'm trying to hate, he's like a C level. The reason why I say this is because for his striking experience, for him to A, be getting hit with the type of shots that he's getting hit with, and B, the number of shots that he's getting hit with are pretty unpleasant to see. I've always said that Pereira is not a great defensive striker. He stands tall and he tends to disconnect his hands from his face, all while trying to pull his head out of range. He does this a lot. It's not like a one-time thing. Pereira isn't the type to put his hands up, catch punches, parry shots, or do any of that stuff. His defense is strictly a hit or miss. If you pay attention to his pad work footage, you'll see him drill a lot of the same thing. He'll throw punches, but he'll defend by slipping side to side and countering with combos. That is why in my thread, one of my keys for Pereira to win is to counter straight punches down the pipe. That is what he is susceptible to because of this very reason. But he got it done. Jiri made the mistake of throwing a right hand over the top without setting it up, and Pereira pulled it and countered with a 6-3 that dropped him. But in moments where he wasn't wasn't getting it done. In moments when he couldn't find the mark, in moments when he couldn't counter, he was getting pieced up. And it's so odd that he drops his hands and he pulls his head away in the way that he does it. It happens whenever his opponent is throwing at him. Izzy finished him in the second fight with the same shot that almost finished him in the first fight. And if you pay attention, Pereira reacted to Izzy's jab the same exact way. In both fights, the same exact way. He drops his hands and he pulls his head away. Why would he ever do that? It doesn't make any sense. It's not like he was reacting to a body shot. It's literally a natural instinct for him when he fights. And I'm not trying to be harsh when I say this, but in a way, it's almost a little amateurish. But the point is, when Izzy, Jan, or Jiri decided to throw, they landed almost every single time. And in my last takeaway, let's talk about Jiri's performance. I thought Jiri performed very well minus the damage he took with the calf kicks. He didn't exactly adjust to Pereira's style as he took a lot of low kicks and his stance was still very bladed. You can tell it affected Jiri heavily because he wasn't moving as freely as he usually would like. If you watch Jiri fight, he usually likes to flow. He likes to move around, be herky-jerky, trying to keep you guessing, but after literally a handful of those leg kicks, it affected the way he wanted to fight. But despite him not being able to stop the calf kicks, he did a fantastic job at putting Pereira on the back foot. Pereira is not great on the back foot. Remember, he slowly walks people down after he lands the calf kicks. If he has you up against the fence, that is where he's at his best. So instead of slowly moving backwards where you're going to end up on the fence, or moving to your left where you could run into that calf kick, or moving to your right where you could run into that lead hook, the only option is to step into the fire and go forward. And coincidentally, that is where you can have the most success. Jiri was breaking the rhythm of the fight by advancing forward. He was landing straight punches from his hips down the pipe, and he was landing double backhands, which is something that Pereira doesn't normally see. He normally sees 1-2s, 1-1s, 1-1-2s, but he doesn't normally see 2-2s. At times you also saw Jiri level change to fake a shot and come up with a long uppercut. Dangerous shot, but high risk, high reward when you're fighting a guy like Pereira. In the beginning of the second round, when Jiri started to land, he did very well to stick and move. Jiri did very well to stay patient. He wasn't hanging around in that pocket where Pereira could return with a devastating shot. He was even controlling the hands of Pereira, which was what I really liked. By doing this, once he opens up with shots, he can control the hands and not allow Pereira to counter. But Jiri was getting too comfortable, man. He was getting overzealous with how easy he was landing, and one mistake of throwing a right hand without setting it up allowed Pereira to counter him with a devastating shot. What he should have done was probably change that right hand and go down to the body, because prior to that right hand that he threw, he was already landing like 3 or 4 right hands before that. And even though Pereira's defense is a hit or miss, he's a very smart fighter. When he sees a shot over and over again, he'll adjust to that. That's what his whole training is based around. On top of that, he also had his feet set as well. I felt like Jiri should have feinted more, because in times when he was walking Pereira down without any strikes, Pereira was just able to catch the timing to set up a counter shot. Or when he had Pereira up against the fence, he should have tried to draw him out more, because it's not like Pereira was being totally defensively responsible. In fact, at all. You can just see he was just trying to take shots and deliver his own. So if Jiri was just able to just draw him out and be one step forward, it would have worked wonders for him. But overall, after being a year out of the cage after suffering a horrible shoulder injury, Jiri did very well. I think this is one of the few times where Jiri was able to make Pereira play the nail a lot more than he would like to play the hammer for the majority of the fight. And people are also debating whether or not the stoppage was early, because it appeared that Jiri looked fine when the ref called it off. But he admitted that he was out and it was the correct decision by the referee. But initially, from what I saw, from what it looked like it was an early stoppage. After watching it back, Jiri was stunned by a good shot and he fell backwards because of the elbows that he was taking. I can't seem to find any other reason why he would shoot, try to take Pereira down, but then all of a sudden drop to your back and give your opponent full mount. And the only possibility was that he was out. And if you end up in a position where Pereira now has full mount and you claim that you were out, it's hard to picture Jiri surviving through that. So even though it looks like it's an early stoppage, I don't have an issue with it at all.